Hello, welcome all to another 5 commanders that I want to talk about today. And these commanders are not underrated. I think most of them are actually pretty popular. I mean, some people might view them as underrated, but I really want to talk about 5 commanders that are good to play on a budget. There's just a lot that you can do on a budget. The way that the commanders interact with the cards in your deck makes it so that you're not sacrificing a lot of power. And that's the sign of a good budget commander. It's the versatility of the commander itself. It affords you the ability to explore and do several different things. And it's just basic math. The more that you can do with your commander successfully, the more likely you can then lower your budget and still remain successful. And before I start the video, I would like to remind you all, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Feel free to leave a comment. I do appreciate it. First one we have here is Tashar, Ancestor's Apostle. Tashar is a very flexible commander because you are going to be fooling around with the historic keyword, which it's not really historic itself, but it's what you can cast in order to get creature cards CMC 3 or less back from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you can cast artifacts, legendary, anything, and sagas. Those all will trigger Tashar, so you can get a creature back as long as that creature is in your graveyard and it's CMC 3 or less. Now, if you want to, obviously, if you want to increase your budget for all of these commanders here, you're going to do a lot better. But you want to have potential for power while playing on a cheap budget, so just about every card I'm going to talk about is under $1. I will try to point you in the right direction, give you the best possible advice here. I have played with all of these. You want creatures that are going to cause a loop. That's the cool thing about a Tashar deck, is that you just want to get your artifacts back. You want to play your artifacts and then get creatures that will also help you get artifacts back. And those creatures are Trusty Pack Beast and Treasure Hunter. Both pretty much do the same exact thing. They come into play and they return an artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. Also beneficial because they're only 3 mana and they will be brought back with Tashar's ability. And then you have other creatures, tiny creatures, that will come into play and then bounce back artifacts that are already on the battlefield, because sometimes you're not going to have an artifact that will sacrifice itself, it's just going to sit on the field. You still want to be able to loop with those artifacts as well. So we have Glinthawk and Aviary Mechanic. Again, both cards are pennies. You're not going to break the bank, and these are still good even if you want to increase your budget. You're going to see also just good creatures that are fun to bring back over and over again, maybe not as fun for your opponents. So we have Selfless Savior and Kami of False Hope. The Savior can sacrifice itself so another target creature you control is indestructible. Kami of False Hope can sacrifice itself to prevent all combat damage until end of turn. Both things are fun to bring back because they give you a sense of invulnerability. Need a card draw engine? Well, Bygone Bishop is another good creature. Every time you cast a creature spell, CMC 3 or less, you get to investigate. Those clue artifact tokens you can sacrifice for 2 mana and draw a card. But then we have some artifacts. Tashar, the theme of the deck, is really reliability. It's how often you can play these and get a similar result. We're going to be looking at cards like Mirror Retriever, Junk Diver, and Workshop Assistant. Similarly to our Treasure Hunter, we want these artifacts because they will help us loop. When any of these die, you return another artifact card from your graveyard to your hand, so you can play these and then trigger your Tashar. It also doesn't hurt that we will pretty much always get, it seems, cheap artifacts that offer you at least some kind of value, like Sky Scanner. It enters the battlefield and draws you a card. Even if you don't have some kind of infinite loop, a loop is still a loop, and if you can keep these going, maybe play them a couple times every turn, you're still gonna do pretty well. And then the next card we have is a Yara, First of Lochthwain. We talked about mono white, now let's talk about mono black. I think a Yara has a very good ability, and I know I say that about a lot of cards, but this is very good. Especially in black, you have a combination of life loss and life gain that, while it's not uncommon, you can reliably get it. So every time you play a black creature, whenever you have a black creature enter the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. You can also tap to sacrifice another black creature to draw a card. So if you want to up the budget, you can play something like Thornbite Staff, but I know that's not why you're here. What you want to look for here is some kind of aristocrat strategy. This will combine creatures dying with good abilities, and a lot of that will work into cards like Zulaport Cutthroat, Blood Artist, and Bastion of Remembrance. So whenever a creature you control dies, or in Blood Artist's case, whenever a creature dies, you get to dish out some life loss and you will gain some life. Falcon Wrath Noble is the cheaper version of Blood Artist, so if you are on a really strict budget, I recommend that instead. Another easy way to fool around with this kind of creature is to use tokens. Since it's black creatures entering, you just want something that will give you a bunch of black tokens. You need those black creature ETBs so that you can trigger your Yara. We have cards like Sengir Autocrat, we have Endrick Sar, Master Breeder, and if you really want to pay that kicker cost, you will get a ton of creatures with Josu Ves Lich Knight. This is probably the easiest way, I would say, of winning with this kind of commander, especially on a budget. With the exception of Endrick Sar, a lot of the cards I just mentioned are all under $1. But the idea is exactly the same. The more tokens you get, the more life gain and life loss you'll be able to dish out. If you're looking for a finisher, Plague of Vermin is the most expensive card that you are probably going to look for if you're building on a budget, because it is at least a few dollars, but it's pretty much a one-card win if you have your Yara out there. Starting with you, each player may pay any amount of life. Repeat this process until no one pays life. Each player puts a 1/1 Black Rat creature token into play for each 1 life he or she paid this way. If this is earlier on in the game, it's pretty much over. In addition to what black does already, which is provide great removal, great sack outlet opportunities, I'm actually surprised that as a commander, Yara is not even more popular than what she is right now. So number 3, we have Karmetra, God of Harvests. Not a very expensive god out of all the gods in Theros. Karmetra has always kind of been one that succeeds in commander, maybe not so much anywhere else. But on a budget, I don't know if I can recommend any commander. If you want to ramp up, get all the benefits of playing a good land deck, then this commander. Kind of like with Tashar, you do get the benefit of looping. And all of these loop creatures are just there to replay themselves, like White Mane Lion and Stonecloaker, both of which are dirt cheap and just got reprinted. So the idea here is that you keep playing these creatures and you will get more triggers off your Karmetra, you will get more forests and plains. This in addition to other creatures, again, really cheap budget option creatures like Reclamation Sage, Llanowar Elves. It really doesn't take much to get that trigger going, and then every turn you're just getting 3, 4, 5 lands. So what you do with all those landfall triggers, you play things like Zendikar's Royal. It's not Avenger of Zendikar, we're talking about a budget here, but every time a land enters the battlefield under your control, you create a 2/2 elemental creature token. With the similar idea, we have the newer card Felidar Retreat. So whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get a 2/2 White Cat Beast creature token, or you can put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and they gain vigilance until end of turn. Emiria Angel and Rampaging Baloths are also very good options if you're looking for cheaper creatures that will give you powerful landfall triggers. Overall, I think you have an excellent budget commander option here in Karmetra, and you have such a high ceiling here because when you have a bunch of mana, you can pretty much decide whatever else you want to do. It makes it really easy to throw in new inclusions if you want to up your budget. You don't really have to worry about the mana curve because you have whatever mana you want. The next commander is Izoni Thousand-Eyed. This is secretly my favorite commander option from Guilds of Ravnica. And I'm serious, I think the Undergrowth mechanic works out perfectly in Commander. I think it was one of those abilities from that whole set that wasn't just weak by comparison to the keywords from previous Ravnica sets. When it enters the battlefield, you get a 1/1 black and green insect creature token for each creature card in your graveyard. You can pay 2 mana to sacrifice another creature and you gain 1 life and draw a card. You don't have to play a pure graveyard deck, but it seems like it would benefit the most if you did. So you really want to play a graveyard deck here, and on a budget, there are just so many good options. We have Glorispore Shaman. When it enters the battlefield, you put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, and then you get to put a land card from your graveyard on top of your library. So let's say you're short on mana, this will help you out, but it's really just there to be a cheap creature that will fill your graveyard easily. We also have Nyx Weaver, but to do this on each one of our upkeeps. Also really cool because we can pay 3 mana and exile it to get back a target card from our graveyard. The newer Mana Dork, Skull Prophet, can tap to put the top 2 cards of our library into our graveyard instead of tapping for mana. As an instant, Grizzly Salvage has been one of the better cards that you can play on a budget because you get to reveal the top 5 cards of your library, put a creature or land card from among them into your hand, and put the rest into your graveyard. So instead of going 3 deep or 2 deep, you get to go 5 deep, fill your graveyard pretty easily at instant speed. And to make it even better, you have clear win cons here that are actually pretty cheap. you have Gerard Golgari Lichlord, which gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. So I really like how these two commanders blend together well. You still have some good dredge on a budget too, so don't forget about that. Both Stinkweed Imp and Shambling Shell will let you dredge. Stinkweed Imp will let you dredge 5, but Shambling Shell is able to sacrifice itself. And then the last commander option I want to talk about here is a Lila Artful Provocateur. So she's a pretty popular commander option, and I think she might be the best one here if you want to play on a budget, because like I said at the beginning of the video, it's about how much you're able to synergize with, and holy cow, she starts it off with 3 good keywords, Flying, Death Touch, and Lifelink, and then other creatures you control with Flying get +1 power. Whenever you cast an artifact or an enchantment spell, you get a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with Flying. So you have Flying Tribal, you have Fairy Tribal, you can play an artifact deck or an enchantment deck or both. You have a ton of flexibility here, and when you have a ton of flexibility, it means that your options can be pretty cheap as well. So if you're looking to play an enchantment deck, well, you have some pretty good options here. You have All That Glitters, Favorable Winds, and Reconnaissance Mission. All of these are pretty cheap. Reconnaissance Mission is well worth it if you get those tokens. You can deal combat damage and then draw more cards. If you're looking for Flying Tribal, I recommend you play the newer Empyrean Eagle, as well as Sephara Sky's Blade. Flying Tribal is actually pretty cool. It's flying under the radar, quite literally, but this will make all of your other flying creatures indestructible, so you just have a ton to really work with there. Of course, if you decide to go the artifact route, you have ways of making it easier to cast your artifacts because you can play cards like Foundry Inspector and Joyver's Familiar. If your artifacts are a lot cheaper, you get to play more of them, you get more triggers, more fairies, just makes it easier to play your deck. If you want to play a combination of all of these, there are plenty of cards that overlap, so you'll have Bite into Thassa. If you want to play more of an artifact enchantment deck, you have a hybrid there. If you want to play a flying enchantment deck, you have a card like Gravitational Shift. It's another enchantment that focuses on flying creatures. So there's plenty of options here to explore. You can go entirely in one direction. You don't have to compromise. You don't have to throw in some enchantments if you don't want them. That's really what makes a good budget commander really good. It's the flexibility. But anyway, let me know what you think about these 5 commander options. I think they're wonderful. I know for a lot of people you go either 0 or 100 on the budget scale. There are very few people that go, well, I want to play somewhere in the middle. You either want to play the most competitive deck, or you want to play the cheapest deck that you can play, while also remaining competitive. Hopefully this video helped you out. Void here signing off. Have a wonderful day.